All right. We are live here for another wonderful edition of Channel Agronomy Office Hours. I'm Nick Weber, moderating here. They welcomed me back. I took a little brief hiatus, but they brought me back for this special edition on all things fungicide. So, very timely and relevant topic as we head into the reproductive stages for corn and soybeans. A lot of wild weather, which seems to be the norm nowadays, it feels like. And so we've got Brian Denning, who's a technical agronomist down in southern Indiana with the Channel brand. And then Randy Myers, who's our Bayer fungicide expert. He's been around for dozens of years now, which is it's a good thing, Randy. And then Simon Larson, who's one of our channel, not our, but is a channel SeedPro up in Wisconsin. So varied across the geographies here and expertise that we have, and excited to dive into this fun topic of all things fungicide. So I'm going to kick things off with Brian here, and it's June 12th. We've had a fun and wild and interesting year. You've probably been getting the same rains that our area in St. Louis has been getting. It's been a challenging planting season, but for the most part, the crop is in the ground and guys are off and running. So give us sort of your state of affairs, if you will, or state of southern Indiana crop progress and what you guys have experienced this season so far.
Yep. Good morning, everyone. You nailed it. The word for this spring was wet. Had to been. It's been a while since we've had a spring like this where it just kept raining. We never really had a long stretch where we were able to get in there and do a lot of field work. So it was just hunting and pecking continually all spring long, and trying to find those windows to where we could get some corn and soybeans in the ground. And we're still planning. Honestly, we're actually just got a text this morning from one of our seed pros wondering about some 100 to 105 day corn, which is really early for us. Trying to get some more into the ground today. So yeah, it's been challenging. We started, we got some corn in probably that second week of April, towards that middle of April. We're fortunate to have a little bit of a window there, and then we parked it for a good while, and then from then on it was just 2 days here, a day there, a couple of days here, a couple of days there. So all in all, I would say we probably were able to get in 98% of the crop, to this point, at least what we had planned on. So there could be some that doesn't get in. There has been some that has been changed to soybeans, of course, and when you see a spring like this, that's always going to be the case. But as far as our outlook goes, certainly when we see a spring like this, we have a lot of rain, a lot of moisture. The one good thing is that it hasn't been too cool. So I would not consider this a cold spring or a cool spring. So it was relatively warm. Matter of fact, since like mid-April, if you look at that till today, we're about, if you look in that Evansville, Indiana area up to Terre Haute, we're above normal on GDUs by anywhere from 70 to 80 units. But if you take from mid-May to now, we're actually behind. So really that April time period to mid-May time period was really warm, and so that was probably a good thing from a disease standpoint. But with all that being said, a couple of diseases that we're certainly extremely concerned about. Certainly tar spot's going to be one. Last year was our turn, here in this area for tar spot. We had a huge outbreak, some really impactful, yields.
I'm starting to lose Brian there on the production side, so I'm going to switch.
Yeah. Still count me? Can you hear me?
Yep, now you're good. Sorry, kind of
Oh,
going back and forth.
okay.
Wonders of live television, the television or internet here.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
You're good
Okay.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just talking about the disease, some of the things that we're looking at. Certainly tar spot. It was our turn last year. This is, when you have this type of moisture, especially in June, going into June and looking at the long-term forecast, it is going to continue to rain if you take some of the forecasting services into account. And they've been kind of on the money so far this year. So if we expect a wet June,
Sorry about that.
we're certainly going to be looking at probably some tar spot impact. The other disease that we continually look at, and last year was a bad year for it too, was crown rot in corn. So those two, a lot of times they go hand in hand. And when you have a wet early 30 to 45 days, after planting, that's when that crown rot can really get a running start. And so those two diseases are high on the radar for corn. Soybeans, they're so young yet, or there's nothing really on the radar at this point. So we've had 2x the rainfall that we normally have at this point. So that's been the word this year, is just wet.
Good deal. Thanks for that recap there. It's hopefully gets a little more normal-ish here going forward. Real quick before we turn over to Simon for his update, if you've got questions, pop them in the chat, whatever platform you're on. I think we're on all three today with Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So please, want to make this somewhat interactive. We'll get into some more fungicide conversation, which we always know is a hot topic. So if you got questions, they'll pop them in the chat, but we'll take them throughout and get to them as we go along here. So Simon, turning over to you for the Wisconsin update. Give us your sort of year-to-date status, how things have been going up in your neck of the woods, where you're at, sort of how things are going up there.
Yeah. So first, can everybody hear me?
We can hear you. Just put your camera up a little bit towards your face there, and we'll be good to go.
There we go. Sorry. So everything looks pretty good. We have been cooler than what we would have preferred to be. Finally got some warm days here. The corn looks really good. The beans are, the word I would use is stagnant. They haven't done a lot yet. We've been working on them. But, so far, good planting season. Everything put in relatively early. Put it in a good time. And we're kind of waiting for some more heat so these beans can get going. A lot of people are doing post-spraying right now. We've had just enough rain in terms of talking about fungicide, where we are slightly worried about some anthracnose. It's from soil debris splashing and scratching leaves and allowing that infection. So there have been some instances where we've done some early season fungicide just through a sprayer pass. But yeah, otherwise we're just kind of waiting for a little more heat and things to really get going here, so they'll pop up and grow. That's the biggest concern right now, because the weeds are outgrowing our crop.
Yeah, it's been a common theme across a lot of the country, I feel like, this year. So with wet and cool conditions, I know, Randy, that's part of our wonderful disease triangle, which you're probably going to hit on here shortly. So we've got sort of the state of affairs across a couple good states here from our row crop side. Let's turn over to you to kind of give us, if you will, your 101 on fungicides and how this all sort of ties together, and what's happening in these two particular areas certainly has an impact when it comes to the growing season for corn diseases and whatnot and funguses. But what roles maybe fungicides play that can help as these guys go along and as customers in these particular areas prepare for like a disease season coming up?
Well, Simon already talked about this, about helping protect the plants at this early stage, because in almost 3/4 of the cornfields across the United States, they're making application of a herbicide. So it's pretty easy to throw a fungicide in the tank at that time. A lot of people say, well, why would you put a fungicide in when the corn plants are so small and they look so healthy? Why would I think about a fungicide? Two big reasons is stalk strength. If I make the application of fungicide at this time, as I get lignification of those cell walls, I will have a stronger stalk. Also, a lot of the things that eventually in August become stalk rots, whether it's crown rot or stalk rot, those fungi invade the plant very early in the season. So making an application either at planting or in that early stage window does a good job of helping keep the pathogens, those fungi, out of the stalk so they can't become stalk rots later on. And then the second big thing is a lot of these diseases survive in the crop residue. And what we like, they don't just all of a sudden jump from the soil up to the ear leaf, the most important leaf of the plant. First, we get spores produced in the soil, and then we get splashed and move those spores off the soil surface up to the bottom leaves. They'll germinate, cycle, and produce more spores. And then this cycling goes on, and the disease climbs up the plant like a ladder. If we can keep the bottom rungs of this ladder clean by making this early season application, it delays the infection later on in the season. And so you get this season-long benefit. Now, does that mean it displaces the need for a tassel application? Oh, no. But it does have value there. So going back to Simon's point, there are some good reasons why we would think about putting a fungicide in at this early timing. But the most common timings then are those post-tassel sprays. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if we can go into the slide decks that I had some slides that I put in. I don't know if we want to go into those now or go into those later, Nick.
Let's do it now. Let's go right into it. I think it's a good base to where I think everyone kind of needs sometimes a refresher on fungicides. We've been talking a lot about it for the last 10 years in particular, it feels like, but it's new for some. And so let's dive into what you've got, and we've got some slides that we can pull up and take 5-10 minutes to kind of roll through these and set our conversation here.
Well, what I want to do is kind of touch on application timing. And so that first slide, those are data points that were pulled up from Crop Protection Network. And Crop Protection Network is a great website. You can see it down in the lower left corner, this cropprotectionnetwork.org. I recommend you go there when you have fungicide questions, because they cover all kinds of crops in this website. And it's information pulled together from land-grant universities, researchers across the United States and Southern Canada, and they collaborate to put this information on that website. So I recommend you go there and look for things. But one of the questions that was asked was, with tar spot coming in like it does, when do we make an application timing? When do we spray for this disease? So these researchers put together some work. This is in 2020, which wasn't a real high tar spot year, but it gives a good indication what's going on. And they were asking that question, when do I spray for this disease? They broke it into two data sets, one with a low disease environment and one at high disease environment. And you'll notice that this window, VT to R2, that's when you mostly make your applications, that when the VT applications, when the last branch of tassel comes out of the whorl, and then R2, that's brown silk. This is the window when we really want to protect the leaves. Now, we're only halfway through the season, so we got a long way to go. But timing is critical, because all of the leaves the corn plant is going to have, they're now out. And we want to give those things protection so that we don't have a continuation of the development of disease. A fungicide can't fix damage done. So timing is important to make sure that we can minimize the damage and thus the impact on our plants. But looking at this window, you can see pre-tassel applications like V8 and V10, they're too early. And for diseases like tar spot or southern rust, another example where the spore dissemination is through the air broadly, if we make the application before the leaves are out, any leaves that emerge after the application are fully vulnerable to the infection. That's why the pre-tassel sprays for a disease like tar spot, they're not really good enough. And then you look where the R5 is, that's too late. Damage is already done, and we can't get in there and fix that damage. On the next slide, it was under high disease environment. Now, the question was, does it change as the disease pressure goes up? And the answer really is no. We're still in that VT to R2 window. That's still when we want to be able to target the applications. That's the time we've always been talking about for northern corn leaf blight and gray leaf spot. And the question was, well, do we need to change timing for the diseases? The data would indicate no, that's still the primary time, because what we're trying to do is protect our leaf canopy. And this is the timing when we can get that greatest protection. And if the disease comes in later, we're talking, after dent, then it's difficult for the disease to build up enough to have an impact on yield. And at that time, the plant has already stored so much carbohydrate in the stalks that it can access that to finish out the rest of the season. So this is a critical time we need to protect those plants. If you jump to the next slide, there's some data that they generate. This is in 2021, and you can see that there are differences among these different fungicides, but fungicides make a difference. All the fungicides that were tested there was statistically less disease at R5 when they made the application in this VT-R2 window and then looked at R5 to see what the disease pressure was, and you see all the fungicides were able to statistically reduce the amount of disease. You might think, well, wait a minute, look at Delaro Complete, for instance, a Bayer's fungicide. And you can notice it's different from a lot of the fungicides, but you think, wait a minute, that's still not very good. I mean, we're still having disease in there. Understand that when these applications are made, if disease is already there, a fungicide can't fix that. It can help with the progression of the disease, but it can't fix damage already done. So keep that in mind. And what really is important is how does the disease progress? This is at R5, so we still have a long way to go in the season. But fungicides do make a big difference. The next slide kind of shows that there is a correlation between disease control and your yields. And you see that the good performing fungicides, statistically, they are different in their yield response compared to the untreated check. So yeah, which fungicide you decide to use, that's an important piece. But in the next slide, what I wanted to kind of show was the importance of the timing of the application. Now, this was some work that was done in our controlled environment down in Chesterfield, Missouri. And there we're culturing the disease and being able to look at this under a controlled environment. The ideal conditions of this disease, kind of cooler conditions, but high humidity, that helps this disease just go rampant. And what we found out when we're working with the tar spot is that it can go from spore germination to producing new spores in 10 to 12 days under ideal conditions, which is a little bit scary. That's a fast cycle. Well, in this case, we're looking to see what the impact is of the fungicide relative to when the infection takes place. On the image on the far left, this was 1 day before inoculation. So we sprayed, and we have this preventative activity that we get from Delaro Complete, from the chemistries that we've got in there. All three chemistries in Delaro Complete give protective activity. We make the application before the infection. Cool. These images were taken 21 days after inoculation. And you can see that disease had no chance to get started. But now if we delay the application of the fungicide relative to the infection, notice that 7 days after inoculation, we now have some chlorotic spots in there. We sprayed the fungicide, but like I said, the fungicide can't fix damage already done. So regardless of what we do, we can help limit the impact, but the plant, there's no chance for the plant to fix itself. That's why it's important to protect the canopy. And the third image, that's Delaro Complete at 14 days after inoculation. And notice we've got full-blown lesions on there. Spraying the fungicide here cannot stop that or eliminate it because that already had taken place before you made the spray. Like I said, this disease can cycle 10 to 12 days, comes in around pretty fast. But a big important difference between that slide, Delaro Complete at 14 days after inoculation, and the non-treated. Notice that although we couldn't stop the lesions from forming because the damage had already been done, notice this little kind of white stuff on the top of those spores, on top of the lesions. That's spores. And we're not seeing that in the treated leaf surface. Now, you go out in the field where you have tar spot, you're unlikely to see this because with water and wind and so forth, those spores are dispersed and disseminated rather readily. And so you don't see this agglomeration of spores right there on the surface. But that's an important thing. On the next slide, you'll see as we kind of compare those leaf surfaces, you'll see that we got these spores on top. That's plays a big role in the polycyclic nature of this disease. If it's going through generations every 10 to 12 days, there's under ideal condition. Now, in the field, it's typically longer than that, especially when it gets dry, it can kind of slow the development down. But the threat is still there. And as we go through these multiple cycles, this disease can explode. So the resporulation of these diseases, that's a critical piece. And your fungicide can help slow that down. So as the damage accumulates through the season, we can slow that down and allow these plants to be more productive. So I think I may have one more slide that was there. Yeah, this is just looking at all the corn leaves side by side. And the non-treated, notice how much larger those lesions got and they grew. And we were able to arrest the development with the application of fungicide. In the real world, though, that non-treated leaf, that is going to be completely destroyed because this was one infection event. In the real world, there's lots of infection events, and we get more spores being produced by each lesion. So we go through multiple generations, and without protection, that plant would be totally destroyed. So it's important to recognize how important it is to use a fungicide as a tool to help manage this disease. and why the timing of the application is so important to be able to get the most out of that investment you're making. Hey, fungicides aren't cheap, but they are extremely important tools to help manage diseases and their impact, and getting the most out of those other expensive inputs you've already put in, your time, your fuel costs, fertilizer, all these costs you put in. You want to get the most out of all these inputs, and fungicides can help ensure that you do get your money back out of your inputs. That's kind of the high point that I want to touch on today, Nick.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. Great stuff, Randy. I guess a couple things to dumb it down for a simple person like me, I suppose, is like, so basically two things that kind of took away is it doesn't have, I've heard you say this before, but I think about like, you get some cuts on your hands or your fingers from doing yard work, and, you put on an antibiotic cream and it cures it within 7 days time. A fungicide doesn't have that ability to cure that infection spot, is sort of what we're kind of saying. And then, because the cycles keep going, you're really impacting photosynthesis of that leaf at those critical times when it's doing grain fill. And so those seeing is believing things, even an application at some point, even after you've noticed tar spot or any disease that has a control that can be managed with the fungicide, it's important to get one out there, it seems.
Yeah, we want to minimize the impact of that pathogen. We can't eliminate the disease, right, but we can reduce its impact on our yield. So it's important to utilize all these tools, scout your fields, understand what's going on, and recognize how rapidly this disease can spread and develop.
Yeah, that's great. Again, if you've got questions, please throw them in our chats on either of the platforms that we're on right now. We'd love to get some audience input and feedback. I'm going to turn it over to Brian here. And Brian, kind of building out some of the stuff Randy had talked about with research and whatnot. I know you guys in the Indiana region with Bayer have done a few trials at looking in particular at tar spot and various fungicide passes, and kind of just give me your take in living sort of this tar spot world. Like you said, it's been here, 4 or 5 years, and it's here. I think Randy has sort of made that case. It's not going away. It is here, and a disease that we're going to have to manage going forward here. So kind of give us a take on what you guys are seeing in your area and how you're collaborating with your other channel technical agronomists and tech development reps with Bayer to kind of think about this disease in some different ways, maybe.
Yeah, a lot of focus on this particular disease. And I do want to say too that's not to say that we're forgetting about any of the other diseases, because I was sitting there listening to Randy, and as tar spot always gets the focus, but we still have gray leaf spot, we still have southern rust, and particularly gray leaf spot. It always kind of takes a back seat, but it's kind of like a death by 1,000 paper cuts with some of these diseases, and they all add up together. And that's the nice thing about the fungicide program that we promote, is that Delaware Complete in particular is really good against all these different diseases. It's not just a one-trick pony, but anyway, yeah. As far as tar spot and how we've tried to tackle it, in this, I guess, Eastern Corn Belt. Last year, we kind of initiated a what we call RAMP trials, which stand for Regional Agronomic Management Plots. And so what we tried to do is take a number of plots, market development plots, and we essentially split them in half. So maybe a back half and a front half. And we used drones almost exclusively to spray half of the plot at like a VTR1 timing. And what we tried to do is just, try to look at the different hybrids and the reaction, because we also know that, the genetic piece is certainly important here as well, and try to see, what impact the fungicides have on the different hybrids. And you can see here on this slide, this is kind of a summary of those that worked last year. Again, tar spot was the primary disease. This is about 8 sites, and you can see there across a number of different hybrids, all the way from mid 104, 105 day hybrid all the way up to 118 day, and every one of them responded to the fungicide application. which is no surprise last year. And we had some that responded way above others. We saw from 10 to probably over 30 bushel difference between the hybrids. And we're going to do this again. So we planned on that again. Matter of fact, I think I have another slide there that kind of outlines our 2025 plans. So not only are we looking at VTR1 applications, we're also going to be looking at some of the early vegetative applications like a V5, V6, like Randy mentioned earlier, and even that R3, R4, and combinations of these. Myself, I think I've got 2 locations that I'm going to try to execute, and in both of those locations, they're going to have an early veg, and in one of them that'll be the difference. So we'll have it on/off on a V5, V6, followed by VTR1, and at the other one we're going to have everything will get an early veg application. It'll get an early VTR1. And then we'll have an on/off on the R3, R4. So we're really trying hard to figure out this timing, and that's what changes every year. Just like we talked about earlier, the difference between this year and last year is the planting, the timing of planting. We're much later this year, for the most part. There's not a lot of what I would call large corn. You have to get down into Kentucky area before you get into some of the larger corn. Most of the earlier corn here now is maybe in that V10 range. And honestly, that's about the time that we want to start to scout for this, because last year I saw tar spot for the first time on June 20th, and that was on some V10, V11 corn. So that was way, way earlier than we had ever seen it before. And so we knew we were in trouble probably at that point. And last year was as painful as it was from a yield standpoint in some cases, where we didn't get exactly those timings right. We also learned a ton about that disease and how to tackle it and how to be really proactive with it. And I think that was the biggest thing that we learned, is that you cannot wait. And let me back up. Historically, southern rust has always been the biggest disease for us. In the southern Indiana, you probably go southern Illinois, Kentucky area. That was the disease that we were always concerned about. And because of that, southern rust always came in a little bit later. It had to be blown up, from the winds from the southwest or the southeast. And so we waited a little bit longer to spray our fungicides. Historically, it's been a brown silk type of deal. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not what you want to do with tar spot. So we took that mindset and applied it to last year's environment. And that, in many cases, that was the wrong thing to do. And it cost bushels because of that. So this year, we've been really, hammering on guys to, as soon as we see this disease, to Randy's point, we don't necessarily want to go too early, but we sure don't want to wait till brown silk. Which is what many cases we did last year. We want to get out there at that full tassel, an R1, and really hit it hard at that point. And then we can start to scout from then on to see if it continues to develop, 3 weeks later, and if we need that second shot.
Yeah. Continuous learning. Obviously, this thing's only 8 years old, right? And so every year's different with the weather, and every year's different with how this thing comes to life. So it's great to see the research you guys are doing in those local trials, but like Randy mentioned, the Bayer research is doing a lot of stuff in our greenhouses and controlled environments to help bring better products, frankly, and inform better decisions for customers. And so, pivoting to that with someone like Simon as a SeedPro, Simon, what are some of the things you guys are seeing, one, in Wisconsin with some of the diseases? You probably don't get southern rust unless it's a really, really odd year with hurricanes, I suppose, but you have a different disease, scenarios up there. Talk through that with us. And then just some of the general conversations you have with growers lately, certainly around tar spot, but white mold is more of a disease from a soybean perspective up there in the north. Just kind of give us a flavor for some of the conversations as a SeedPro, those conversations and discussions you have with your customers.
Sure. So one, I guess starting with corn, so our biggest concern as we go with corn would be, tar spot's number one, but then still northern corn leaf blight and gray leaf spot. It, as mentioned before, it's not ever really one disease that we're concerned about. There are a number of them, but obviously with tar spot being the big buzzword. So with as far as corn goes, I think you even got to go back to too. Like we develop fertility programs that we try to make sure we have all the nutrients there, and that also helps with disease. I mean, I'm not opposed. We plan fungicides. We have last year we had 2 spray drones. Ended up buying a third. We did 12,000 acres. This year I bought 2 more. So the goal is to basically be around 20,000. And the best part about the spray drones is that we can be at the field when need be. We don't have to wait for an airplane or a helicopter or anything like that. So our availability is a lot better to be able to react to disease pressure. So that being said, I mean, you couple a good fertility program with a good fungicide plan. We don't do a lot of scouting for that first pass of fungicide because it's pretty much planned for the growers we work with. If we're going to end up doing a second one, that's fine. But if we're creating programs to try and grow good corn, there's not really a lot of question in it. And I think one of the best things I ever heard, I stole from a grower, and I thought it made the most sense to me, is he said that he used to wait to decide if he was going to do fungicide until July. End of July is normally our time frame. End of July, early August. Last year we were a little bit earlier. I think this year we'll probably be a little bit earlier too, probably starting in that 3rd week in July just because of early planting for us. But anyhow, that grower said that he would just make sure he paid for all that when he paid for his other chems, because if he waited until July, when all the money's spent, all the inputs are in, maybe the market isn't responding or doing what you want, and he would make an emotional decision and decide that maybe I don't need to do fungicide. And he said he knows that on his farm, since he's decided to make the decision of just planning that pass, he knows that there's 2 years where he broke even. And there was 8 years where it paid off very, very well. So if we're going to do something and we have an 80% win rate, I don't know why we're just not doing it. And that's why when we develop our plans, it's in the plan. If it gets to a point where a grower does want to take it out, I guess that's the decision to make them. But for right now, it's a part of our system.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then as far as soybeans go, white mold is definitely a concern, and we try to do lots of things to mitigate that. I mean, fungicide being part of that program too. But the conversation that would be is, well, it's relatively expensive to do that application, and they're not wrong, but it's also relatively expensive to harvest 15 bushel soybeans too. So, it's what it is. If you have white mold, you have to do something. That's just all there is to it.
Yeah.
And we have definitely a lot of fields, history of manure being the state of Wisconsin, and then lower lying areas, bottoms. It's worse in narrower rows. So there's just a lot of fields where we know we have a history where if we don't make those applications, there's no anticipation of any yield that's worthwhile. And then you add into that if you can get 10 bushel beans or $10 a bushel beans contracted, you're doing well. So we can't not make those applications on those fields.
Yeah. Well, farming is, I've heard some people say farming is gambling. And I think most gamblers would take an 80% win rate, as you mentioned earlier on a fungicide program in corn. So I want to come back to you in a second, Simon, on a few things. But Brian, soybeans, we kind of were getting there with the white mold. Frog eye, in a previous conversation, you and I talked about frog eye leaf spot as one of the key soybean diseases in your area. So I don't want to treat soybeans as a second fiddle here. So talk a little bit about your soybean situation that you guys have from a disease, but also any sort of fungicide programs you recommend there.
Yeah, soybeans has almost been the exact opposite of corn. For us, it's been the last 2 years have been really quiet from a disease standpoint. But we know that frog eye leaf spot can occur at any time. We've had years where it impacted yield significantly. So we're always on alert for that. Frog eye it's kind of more of a, I guess it's maybe more of a southern disease, but most people know around here and have that memory that we have to pay attention to it. The nice thing is that over the last, I would say, 5 to 6 years, from a genetic standpoint, we've really improved our genetics from a resistance standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been a real plus in terms of battling that disease, and that may have something to do with where we haven't seen the impact as we had in few of those years.
Yeah.
But like Simon said, I would say the majority of the bean acres get an R3 application for soybeans.
Okay.
It's just planned. Now, years like this year where the economics might be a little tighter, there might be some appetite for skipping that this year. And that's fine. I mean, it's a good IPM practice is just to go out there and make sure that you have a disease and it's there before we commit to spending some money.
Mm-hmm.
But with that being said, we can't dismiss that. And not only just frog eye, we've got brown spot. There's a number of diseases that kind of, like I said before, they kind of add up. None of them by themselves will impact yield as much as we think, but when you pull them all together, then they can start to do that. So, yeah.
Good deal. Yeah. Hey, we got our first question. So Randy, I'm going to come to you with this one. The Laurel Complete applied at R1. Are there any surfactants or what surfactants to stay away from, or what are your sort of recommendations in your experience with it there?
Well, that's a good question, because if you go back to when the concern about the surfactants started, that goes back quite a number of years, and it was associated with headline applications. We had these beer can ears, and what was happening was the application of the fungicide was damaging the silks, so we were affecting pollination. Since the silks for the kernels on the butt end of the ear come out first, those continue to grow. The silk continues to grow until it gets pollination. So they have the chance to continue to expand. So even though silks got damaged, their expansion allowed the kernel of the butt end to get pollinated, but the ones on the tip did not. So we ended up with these beer can ears where there was barren on the back part of the ear. Now, the reason this happened was not because of the fungicide itself, although the guy's going, hey, I made a fungicide spray and just caused the damage. But it was associated with the surfactant, as Tom said in his question, and it are surfactants that had NPEs in them. That's nonylphenyl ethoxylates. Those can be quite damaging to tissue that's as sensitive as a silk. Great adjuvants to be used with herbicides because we want to get penetration into the plants, so it works really well. But for fungicides, NPEs are a no-no. And there's quite a bit of work done at Purdue University after this phenomenon developed, showing pretty clearly that was the culprit, the NPEs in those adjuvants. Adjuvant manufacturers are well aware that this can be a problem. So their recommendation now have adjusted so that it's different products that do not contain NPEs. Those are the ones you need to be associated with. And as far as the adjuvants themselves, the adjuvant is an important part of this because it does two things. It helps get the spray to our target and helps spread it across the target tissue. So we want to have the adjuvants in there to facilitate that coverage, but we don't need aggressive adjuvants because, oh no, I want that fungicide to get inside, so I'm going to use an aggressive adjuvant to get it in there faster. We don't need that. A lot of the active ingredients like the strobilurins and SDHIs, they work primarily by inhibiting spore germination, which is on the leaf surface. So having it all get inside isn't necessarily a good thing. What I want to do is get good coverage of the active ingredient and the spray solution, good coverage, so the adjuvant can really facilitate that. But we don't need aggressive adjuvants. And as far as the ones to stay away from those that contain NPEs, which generally everybody's aware of that now, so you shouldn't be getting recommendations that include those types of products.
Okay, good. Thanks for the question, Tom. Speaking of coverage, I kind of want to talk about, and I think Simon and even Brian mentioned this earlier, the use of drones. So application method, drones have sort of come on new on the block in the last 10, 15 years. and in particular lately with application of fungicides. And so we've got planes, potentially ground your spray booms can get in there with tractors, and now drones. And Simon, you in particular mentioned drones and investment in drones. Talk us through, one, why you sort of made that investment, I guess, and why you're excited about that application. We've seen some research, and Brian might be able to talk about, the importance or the improvement in coverage you might get from a drone being closer. So I guess kind of talk through your thoughts on the application method that you guys prefer and what you're seeing out there in trends.
Yeah. So, I mean, originally we bought the drones mostly because we needed something to do in July and August other than look at fields. But
that's what fishing is for.
Yeah, well, I don't really do that. But so what I like about them is, we're able to stay right about 15 feet off the top of the crop. And it's funny to me when we talk to growers, because they'll be like, "Well, I thought you'd be lower," and it's like, well, but planes and helicopters are not lower. So, but that's about where we hang out. We've been running T40s, DJI T40s. That's what we have. I'd like to upgrade them, but we haven't. But they have what's called a centrifugal nozzle. So what that does is it creates, I mean, think of a rifle barrel, but it creates a spin, and it pushes the fungicide and or fertility that we have in there down into the canopy really, really well, versus some other spray drones only have just a normal spray nozzle depending on droplet size. So I like these better. There's some other ones on the market that have the same thing. But what we see from that is we do get really good canopy penetration. And then with only being 15 feet off the crop, if you haven't been around these drones, like, they'll bend corn over. I mean, they put down a lot of rotor wash. And I don't want to discount like planes or helicopters, but like we just pick up, like a drone can actually just pick up straight up off of a platform or the ground and go and start on the field. And we do a really good job of getting closer to trees and stuff like that. We still can't get as close to trees as we'd like. You usually end up being about 30 feet away sometimes, depending on the size of the tree. But that's still better than what other aerial applicators are doing. So we're not going to do as many acres as them, but I think we can be a lot more targeted with them. And the other side of that is we can do a lot more sequential applications because we're not waiting for an aerial applicator to come do it. It's like we have one test plot this year where we're just doing applications of fertility on it just to see it. It was an old pasture, so it's literally just a play plot. But we can go spray it once a week if we want to.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the story with it. We can just be there and be more targeted, and I think we've done a really good job of promoting them, and I know that everybody that we sprayed for last year is going to have us do it again this year.
I was gonna say, you're seeing the results, it sounds like, as well.
Correct. Yeah. And there's no one that's been upset with the drones, and everybody that we did it for last year either is having us come back or has talk to their friend. The best business is referrals, right? So
right. yeah, good deal. Brian, some of that ramp work you did and referenced earlier, I think that included some drones. Is there something you can kind of elaborate on that in terms of application method?
No, Simon nailed it. Drone usage has exploded, and certainly a lot of reasons for that. You just outlined a couple of them. Certainly access to smaller fields, more irregular fields. You can access it when it's wet, when it's dry. So there's a lot to like about the drone applications. And I'm not necessarily advocating for one or the other. Honestly, the research that I've seen and we've probably done within Bayer would suggest that they're pretty equal from an aerial perspective, plane to drone. But so I would say, what works for them. And I do agree that you do have to be careful about some things like swath width. Make sure that we don't get that too wide. There's, we want to make sure we do a lot of acres in a day, but we also want to do a good job. And there's, sometimes when you get in that 30, 35 foot swath width, you can start to see, those edges start to get really, really thin on application coverage. So, those are all trial and error. That has things to do with speed and the height above the canopy, all of those things. So it's not just a plug and play type of thing. You really have to do your homework on these drones and make sure you're getting them squared away. But the main thing is to use one of them. Whether it's a ground rig, which still do a fantastic job. The only downside with those, in my mind, is certainly you're running over a crop in corn and certainly in soybeans, and I see a lot of uptick in drone usage in soybeans because of that piece alone. Is that you're not running over the crop. Yeah. But there's no stopping. The drone usage is going to continue to get more and more without question. I see more farmers just getting their own drones instead of hiring out drone drone usage themselves. So it's going to continue to get bigger.
Yeah, good deal. Got time for go ahead, Randy.
Squeeze something in there. The biggest piece with Simon's comments, timing the application is the most important thing to get it out of the most of a fungicide. And since he's controlling the application timing and doesn't care if the soil's wet or not, he can get in there with the fields. That flexibility and timing is really, really the biggest advantage that I see with drone applications. But one comment I want to make is the products that can be applied, they have to have an aerial application section on the label to legally allow them to make that spray. And so they're saying if it's got an aerial application label, you can go ahead and use drone. So that section has to be there. And another thing is minimum carrier volume by air is 2 gallons per acre. That applies to drones as well, because I've had some guys who have a drone business and they're going, hey, I'm out there spraying fields at 1 gallon per acre and how efficient they are and so forth. Whoa, stop, guys. That's not a legal application, because in order to go less than 2 gallons, we have to do complete different residue studies and submit that to EPA. And no company has done those to support that lower use. So at 2 gallons per acre, that's as low as we can go. Even though a lot of guys with the drones are out there trying to cut down that carrier volume to increase the amount of acres, number of acres they can cover with one load, 2 gallons is still as low as we can go with that.
As Randy, you can say it best, but always follow labeled guidelines, right?
Yes, please.
Yeah. One quick question in the chat I want to get to with Simon probably might be the most appropriate to answer this, and then we'll wrap up with the roundtable here, mainly because my computer's about to die. But Kyle has a question on what the average cost per acre for a drone for applying fungicide. Simon, I know probably it differs on your geography and acres or spraying, but maybe you can kind of give a ballpark answer to that.
Yeah. So, like the unique part about like where we work is the biggest field I deal with is 943 acres, and the smallest field I deal with is contour strips that could be. So what we charge is, obviously we try to provide the fungicide and the fertility and whatnot, but as far as just a straight application fee, we're right around $15.50 an acre. So,
yeah, good deal. All right. Well, we've been going a good strong 45 minutes here, so let's wrap this up. I appreciate your time and all the conversation we've had. It's really insightful and enlightening, and hopefully we're getting the folks listening here ready for spray season. So let's do one quick roundtable here. I'll start with Randy, then Brian, then Simon. Thoughts, general thoughts on fungicide. I think one thing, Randy, I had a note that I wanted to get with you real quick. If you can summarize quickly, would be, hey, innovation in the fungicide space is across all companies, frankly, has been fairly phenomenal. And certainly you've played a long role, a history of that with Bayer. Kind of speak to that, and then just sort of your last final parting words for growers as we go along. And I'll do the same for Brian and Simon, and we'll wrap up.
Well, we're always looking for products which perform better, but having products with multiple modes of action are better performing products because we're attacking the fungus from different ways, allowing for better consistency. So you want that. We also are concerned about resistance development because we've only got 3 classes out there. So that's why mixing all 3 in one application helps preserve or reduce selection pressure against any one of them. And we have new active ingredients. We have new modes of action that are in the pipeline, but it's going to take time to get those here. Now, we need these exciting tools. We also have to preserve the ones that we've got. So cutting corners, I'm not an advocate of spraying a single mode of action at any time during the season because it can apply some selection pressure. And we really want to be able to get the performance we're looking for if we're making a spray, but we also want to make sure that we can preserve the utility of our active ingredients.
Okay. And Brian, look ahead maybe from June 12th at 9:30 through the rest of the season. Look in your crystal ball, what you're kind of seeing for everybody in your neck of the woods.
I hope fantastic yields and great growing conditions, but just be vigilant. You have to get out into your fields to understand what's going on out there. Employ your local SeedPro, your local TA, your local FSR to help you with that. We do a lot of training for those scenarios themselves. So that's what we're here for. Use this for those purposes. And we always try to communicate just as soon as we possibly know. If we see a disease out there, I know we have a number of different communication methods. I use a texting service a lot, various social media channels to get that message out there so that you guys can act in a really timely fashion. But like I said, it's just a matter of getting out there in those fields and knowing what's out there.
Good deal. And Simon, final words from you, please.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just make sure that we're doing it. And I guess the other thing, not to go too far down the rabbit hole of the drone thing, but I know I have lots of other people that are trying to do it commercially in my area, and I guess I would watch out for this if I was advising growers. I agree 100% with the 2 gallons the acre. That's what we've always sprayed. That's the label. And I know people that spray less, 1 gallon, 1.3 gallons. The coverage isn't there. And the other thing I would say is make sure that if you're having somebody come on a drone, ask them if they have the proper licensure, because there's a lot of things that go with that. And if they don't have, the FAA stuff and the state by state commercial applicator licenses, they can't get insurance. So if they can't get insurance, if something happens, to your crop or whatnot, I mean, maybe there's contamination or whatnot, but if they don't have those things, it's questions I would ask, or at least make sure that you're having your growers ask, because I think those are very important.
Yeah. Good deal. Well, we will wrap it up there with all things fungicide. If you have any questions, like Brian said, reach out to your SeedPro, your technical agronomist in your area. We'll be talking a lot more about fungicides here in the next 3 to 6 weeks for sure. Randy Myers is the dean of all of our fungicide stuff here. You might be seeing more of him across the circuit here this summer too. Appreciate all your time, guys. Have a good and safe season. Brian, for you, wrapping things up. Sounds like Simon, you're done, but we're excited to get the season, planting season done and move into the growing and get those good yields you're talking about, Brian. So thanks everybody for watching as well. We'll see you next month with another edition of this. Take care.